My name is Robert Hayes and I'm 63 years old. On New Year's Day 2024, at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon, I was lying on my living room couch pretending to be asleep after our family's New Year's brunch. What my children didn't know was that I was wide awake, and I heard every single word of their conversation about how to take control of my assets, declare me incompetent, and divide my estate among themselves before I had a chance to waste it on some gold digger or nursing home. They had no idea that the entire conversation was being recorded by 3 hidden cameras I'd installed throughout my house 2 weeks earlier, or that my attorney was on speed dial ready to execute the plan I'd been preparing since Thanksgiving. But let me start from the beginning because this story isn't just about one overheard conversation on New Year's Day. This is about watching your own children transform from the people you raised and loved into strangers willing to betray you for money, and about the moment you decide that blood relation doesn't entitle anyone to treat you like you're already dead. I'm a widower. My wife Catherine passed away from cancer 3 years ago in January of 2021, and those 3 years since her death have shown me exactly who my children really are when there's no one left to keep them in check. Catherine and I raised 3 children together. My oldest son Michael, who's 38, my daughter Jennifer, who's 35, and my youngest son David, who's 32. We lived a good life, not extravagant but comfortable. I spent 35 years working as a mechanical engineer for an aerospace company, eventually becoming a senior project manager before I retired in 2019 at age 59. Catherine was a high school English teacher for 30 years before she retired in 2017. We saved diligently, invested carefully, paid for all 3 kids to go to college without loans, and by the time I retired we had accumulated about $4.2 million in assets between our retirement accounts, our paid-off house in a nice suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, and various investment accounts we'd built up over the decades. When Catherine got sick in late 2019, we spent about $300,000 on treatments that insurance didn't fully cover, experimental therapies, and trying everything possible to save her life. It didn't work, and she died in January 2021, which was devastating for all of us but especially for me after 41 years of marriage. The grief was overwhelming, and for the first year after her death I was barely functioning, just going through the motions of daily life while trying to figure out who I was without her. My kids were supportive initially, visiting regularly, calling to check on me, helping me sort through Catherine's belongings and handle all the estate paperwork. But somewhere around the end of 2021, about a year after Catherine died, I started noticing a change in how my children interacted with me. The visits became less frequent unless they needed something. The phone calls became shorter and more transactional. And increasingly, the conversations turned to questions about my finances, my plans for the future, what I intended to do with the house, whether I'd updated my will recently, had I thought about long-term care planning, all these questions that felt less like concern for my well-being and more like inventory assessment. At first I thought I was being paranoid, that grief was making me suspicious and reading malice into normal family concern. Then came Thanksgiving 2023, which was the moment I realized I wasn't being paranoid at all. I'd hosted Thanksgiving dinner at my house like I'd done every year, and all 3 of my kids came with their families. Michael brought his wife Laura and their 2 teenagers. Jennifer came with her husband Scott and their 3 young kids. David showed up with his fiancée Amanda, who I'd met maybe twice before. The day seemed to go well enough. Everyone ate and talked and the grandkids played, all very normal surface-level family gathering stuff. After dinner, I went upstairs to lie down for a bit because I was tired and honestly still found holidays emotionally difficult without Catherine. I must have dozed off for about 45 minutes, and when I woke up and started coming back downstairs, I heard my children's voices coming from my home office, which was strange because that room was supposed to be off-limits during family gatherings. I stopped on the stairs and listened, and what I heard made my blood run cold. They were going through my financial documents, papers I kept in my desk, talking in urgent whispers about how much I had, where it was kept, whether my will was updated, and how they needed to take action soon before Dad does something stupid with the money. Michael, my oldest, was apparently the ringleader. "Look at these statements," he was saying. "He's got almost $3.8 million liquid between the investment accounts and retirement funds, plus the house is worth at least $700,000, probably more. That's $4.5 million we're talking about, and he's healthy enough that he could live another 20 years and burn through all of it." Jennifer chimed in, "We need to talk to him about setting up a trust with us as trustees, or getting power of attorney while he's still willing to sign things. Once he gets a girlfriend or starts talking about selling the house, it'll be too late." David, my youngest, said something that really cut deep. "Honestly, at his age with Mom gone, what does he even need money for? We have kids to put through college, mortgages to pay, actual lives to fund. He's just going to sit in this house alone until he dies or ends up in a nursing home anyway. We should be managing this money now while we can still benefit from it. I stood there on my staircase, frozen, listening to my own children discuss my life and my assets like I was already dead or incompetent, like the money I'd spent 40 years earning and saving was somehow rightfully theirs to control. I didn't confront them that day. I quietly went back upstairs, waited 30 minutes, then came down loudly calling out that I'd had a nice nap. They all emerged from my office looking perfectly innocent, and we finished Thanksgiving dinner with everyone pretending nothing had happened. But everything had changed for me in that moment. I now knew exactly what my children thought of me and what they were planning, and I decided right then that I needed to protect myself and my assets from my own family. The day after Thanksgiving, I called my attorney, a man named James Morrison who'd handled Catherine's estate and various legal matters for us over the years. I told him what I'd overheard, and James wasn't surprised at all. "Robert, I've been practicing elder law for 30 years, and I'm sorry to say this is extremely common. Adult children see their aging parents as obstacles standing between them and an inheritance they feel entitled to. The fact that you overheard them plotting means you're ahead of the game. Most people don't realize what's happening until they've already signed over power of attorney or been declared incompetent." James and I met the following week and developed a comprehensive protection strategy. First, we updated my will with very specific provisions including a no-contest clause stating that anyone who challenged the will or attempted to have me declared incompetent would be completely disinherited. Second, we set up what's called a revocable living trust with an independent corporate trustee, not my children, so that even if something did happen to me, they wouldn't have direct control of the assets. Third, we created a detailed letter of intent documenting my current mental state, my awareness of my children's intentions, and my explicit desire to maintain control of my own assets during my lifetime. But James also suggested something that felt extreme but turned out to be absolutely necessary. "Robert, I've seen cases where families claim their parent was incompetent or being manipulated, and it becomes a he said she said situation. What you need is documentation, clear evidence of your mental competency and of their intentions. Have you considered installing security cameras in your home?" I hadn't, but the more James explained, the more sense it made. If my children were going to try to claim I was incompetent or trick me into signing documents, I needed video and audio evidence of both my mental clarity and their schemes. I hired a security company the week after meeting with James, and they installed 6 cameras throughout my house in early December. There were cameras in the living room, kitchen, dining room, my office, and the main hallway, all hidden in normal-looking objects like smoke detectors and bookshelves. Arizona is a one-party consent state for recording, which means I can legally record conversations in my own home without the other parties knowing. Everything was connected to a cloud storage system that James's office also had access to, so even if someone tried to destroy the physical equipment, the recordings would still exist. I also did something else that James recommended. I got a complete cognitive evaluation from a neuropsychologist. I spent 4 hours taking tests that measured memory, reasoning, judgment, and mental capacity, and I received a written report stating that I had normal cognitive function for my age with no signs of dementia, incompetence, or impaired judgment. James had that report notarized and filed with my updated estate documents. "If anyone tries to claim you're incompetent," James explained, "we have professional medical documentation showing that as of December 2023, you were functioning at completely normal cognitive levels." With all these protections in place, I decided to see exactly how far my children would go. I invited all of them to come to my house for New Year's Day brunch, telling them I wanted to start 2024 with family around me and that I had some things I wanted to discuss about the future. They all agreed to come, which I knew they would because they thought this was their opportunity to manipulate me into giving them control. I spent the week after Christmas preparing for what was essentially going to be a test, a chance to see if my children would prove me wrong or confirm everything I suspected about their intentions. New Year's Day 2024 arrived, and my children showed up at noon with their families. I'd catered a nice brunch spread, had champagne and orange juice for mimosas, made everything festive and welcoming. We ate and talked, and I steered the conversation toward my plans for the future, mentioning that I'd been thinking about maybe selling the house and buying something smaller, maybe traveling more, possibly even dating again now that it had been 3 years since Catherine passed. I watched my children's faces as I said these things, and I saw exactly what I expected to see: concern, alarm, barely concealed panic at the idea that I might actually live my own life and spend my own money. After brunch, around 2 p.m., I announced I was feeling tired from the rich food and was going to lie down on the couch for a bit. "You all stay and visit," I said. "I'm just going to rest my eyes for 20 minutes." I lay down on the couch in my living room, position so I looked like I was sleeping, but I could actually hear everything happening in the dining room and kitchen area. I also had my phone in my pocket set to record audio as backup to the house cameras. Within about 5 minutes of me falling asleep, my children gathered in the dining room and their voices became more animated and urgent. Michael started the conversation. "Okay, he's asleep, we need to talk about this seriously. Did you hear him talking about selling the house and traveling? He's going to blow through millions of dollars on stupid shit, and we need to intervene now before it's too late." Jennifer agreed immediately. "He mentioned dating, which means some woman is going to come along and convince him to marry her or put her in his will or buy her things. We've all heard the horror stories about old men getting taken advantage of. We have to do something." David, always the most direct of my children, said what they were all thinking. "We need to get him to sign power of attorney over to us, or we need to start the process of having him declared incompetent. I talked to a lawyer friend of mine who specializes in this stuff, and he said if we can get statements from his doctor about memory issues or confusion, we can petition for guardianship. Once we're his legal guardians, we control everything." I lay there on my couch, eyes closed, listening to my children plot to take away my autonomy and control of my life, and I felt this strange mixture of heartbreak and cold fury. These were people I'd raised, educated, supported through every challenge in their lives, and now they were discussing how to legally strip me of my rights because they wanted access to money I'd earned. Jennifer raised a practical concern. "But he seems pretty sharp still. How do we prove he's incompetent when he's clearly not?" Michael had an answer for that. "We don't need to prove he's incompetent right now. We just need to plant the seeds. Starting today, whenever we talk to his friends, his doctor, anyone in his life, we start mentioning concerns. We say we've noticed memory issues, confusion, poor judgment. We create a narrative that he's declining. Then in a few months, when we petition for guardianship, there's already a pattern of documented concerns." David added, "And we need to do this fast, like by February. Once tax season hits and he starts dealing with his accountant and financial advisors, they might notice if we've taken steps to limit his access. We need to move now while he's still in this post-holiday vulnerable state." They continued talking for another 30 minutes, working out the specific steps of their plan, who would approach which doctors, how they'd document supposed incidents of confusion or poor judgment, when they'd present me with power of attorney documents disguised as simple estate planning updates. The most chilling part was when Jennifer said, "We're doing this for his own good, really? He can't be trusted to manage this money properly anymore, and it's our inheritance anyway. Mom would want us to make sure it stays in the family and benefits her grandchildren." They were actually convincing themselves that stealing my autonomy was an act of love and protection, that they were entitled to control my life because they were my children and wanted my money for their kids. Around 2:45 p.m., they wrapped up their plotting session and started discussing how they'd approach me when I woke up. Michael said he'd start by expressing concern about my plans to sell the house, suggesting that was a big decision I shouldn't rush into. Jennifer would bring up the importance of updating estate documents now that it had been 3 years since Catherine's death. David would offer to help me organize my finances and introduce me to his financial advisor friend who could help protect my assets. It was all coordinated, all manipulative, all designed to slowly take control without me realizing what was happening. I waited another 10 minutes, then made a show of waking up, stretching, yawning, acting like I'd been deeply asleep. My children immediately shifted into their concerned, loving personas, asking if I'd had a nice rest, commenting that I seemed tired lately, maybe I should see my doctor for a checkup. It was such a seamless transition from plotting to performing that it would have been impressive if it wasn't so disturbing. I played along, acting oblivious, letting them execute their plan to see exactly how they'd approach it. Michael started with his rehearsed concern. "Dad, I wanted to talk to you about what you mentioned earlier about selling the house. That's a really big decision and I'm worried you might be rushing into something without fully thinking it through. This house has so many memories of Mom and the market's unpredictable right now. Maybe we should slow down and really consider whether that's the right move." His tone was perfect, concerned but not controlling, loving but with an undercurrent of doubt about my judgment. Jennifer jumped in right on cue. "And Dad, speaking of big decisions, when's the last time you updated your estate documents? It's been 3 years since Mom died, and you really should have everything reviewed and updated. Scott and I could help you go through everything, make sure it's all current and properly organized." David added his piece. "I've actually been working with this great financial advisor, Dad. He specializes in retirement planning and asset protection. I'd love to introduce you to, maybe have him come over and review your portfolio, make sure everything's properly structured and protected." I sat there listening to them execute their plan exactly as they'd rehearsed it 30 minutes earlier, and I felt absolutely nothing but contempt. These people weren't my family anymore. They were strangers wearing my children's faces, saying words designed to manipulate and control me, all while pretending it was out of love and concern. I decided in that moment that they'd played their hand, and now it was time for me to play mine. You know what, kids, I appreciate your concern, I said with a smile. And you're absolutely right that I need to get my affairs in order properly. In fact, I've already done that. I met with James Morrison, my attorney, back in early December, and we updated everything. My will is current, my estate is properly structured, and I've made all the necessary arrangements to protect my assets. I watched their faces carefully, seeing the flash of alarm, the quick exchange of glances between them. That's great, Dad, Michael said, recovering quickly. What kind of arrangements did you make? Maybe we should review them together, make sure everything's set up properly. I smiled wider. Oh, it's all handled. James set up a revocable living trust with an independent corporate trustee, updated my will with a nice no-contest clause, and made sure everything is legally bulletproof. He's very thorough. Jennifer tried to stay casual. A corporate trustee? Dad, that seems complicated. Wouldn't it be easier to have family members manage things if something happened? That's exactly what James and I discussed, I replied. And we decided that keeping financial control independent was the best way to avoid any family conflicts or concerns about improper management. This way, no one can ever accuse anyone of taking advantage or mismanaging assets. David pushed, but Dad, that seems like you don't trust us. We're your children. We only want what's best for you. I let that statement hang in the air for a moment, looking at each of them in turn. David, can I ask you something honestly? I said. Do you remember what you said about an hour ago when you thought I was asleep? His face went pale. What do you mean? Michael and Jennifer also suddenly looked very uncomfortable. I mean the conversation the three of you had in the dining room at approximately 2:15 this afternoon, where you discussed your plans to have me declared incompetent, get power of attorney, take control of my assets, and divide my estate among yourselves before I could waste it on some gold digger or nursing home. Does that ring a bell? The room went completely silent. All three of my children were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to horror to anger. Jennifer tried to deny it. Dad, I don't know what you think you heard, but you must have been dreaming or confused. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app, which had captured the entire conversation. Should I play it back for you? I asked calmly. Or perhaps you'd like to see the video footage. I had security cameras installed throughout the house in early December, all of which record audio and video to cloud storage. Everything you said today was recorded, and my attorney already has access to all of it. Michael's face went from pale to red, anger replacing shock. You recorded us? In your own house without telling us? That's probably illegal. I shook my head. Arizona is a one-party consent state, Michael. I'm allowed to record conversations in my own home without informing the other parties. James made sure everything we did was completely legal. But more importantly, why are you angry about being recorded? If you weren't doing anything wrong, why would it matter? David tried a different approach, standing up and trying to look hurt rather than caught. Dad, you're taking this all wrong. We were just concerned about you, talking about how to help you. You're twisting our words into something malicious when we were only trying to protect you. I stood up as well and my voice got harder. Protect me from what, David? From living my own life? From spending my own money that I earned? From potentially finding companionship after losing your mother? You weren't talking about protecting me, you were talking about protecting your inheritance by taking away my rights. Jennifer started crying, which was her standard manipulation tactic when caught doing something wrong. How can you say that? We love you, Dad. Everything we do is because we love you. I looked at her with what must have been obvious disgust. If this is what your love looks like, Jennifer, I don't want it. Love doesn't involve plotting to have someone declared incompetent so you can steal their autonomy. Love doesn't involve conspiracy to commit fraud by creating false medical narratives. Love doesn't involve treating your father like he's already dead just because you want his money. Michael tried to assert control of the situation. Dad, you're clearly not thinking straight right now. Maybe we should call your doctor, have you evaluated, because this paranoid behavior isn't normal. I laughed, actually laughed out loud at the audacity. That's exactly what you plan to do, isn't it? Start claiming I'm paranoid, confused, not thinking straight, building your case for incompetency. Well, here's something else. James and I prepared for that. In December, I underwent a complete cognitive evaluation by a board-certified neuropsychologist. 4 hours of testing, comprehensive assessment. The report, which is notarized and filed with my estate documents, states that I have completely normal cognitive function for my age with no signs of dementia, impaired judgment, or incompetence. I pulled out my phone again and showed them a photo of the report. So if you try to have me declared incompetent, I have professional medical documentation from less than a month ago proving I'm fully competent. And I have recordings of you plotting to create false medical narratives. How do you think that's going to look to a judge? The three of them just stood there, their entire plan collapsed, no more manipulation tactics left to try. Finally Michael said quietly, "So what happens now?" "Now," I said, "you're all going to leave my house. And you're going to think very carefully about what kind of relationship you want to have with me going forward, if any. Because right now, based on what I heard today and what I heard on Thanksgiving, I don't trust any of you, I don't want you involved in my life or my finances, and I'm seriously considering whether you deserve to inherit anything at all when I do eventually die." Jennifer gasped. "You disinherit your own children?" I looked at her coldly. "You were willing to declare your own father incompetent and steal his autonomy for money. Why is my response somehow worse than your actions? At least I'm being honest about it." David tried once more. "Dad, please, can we just talk about this calmly? We made a mistake, we said things we didn't mean, but we're still your family." "No," I said firmly. "You stopped being my family when you decided I was an obstacle between you and money rather than a person deserving of respect and autonomy. You're my biological children, but you're not my family anymore. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Now please leave, all of you. And don't bother coming back unless you're prepared to genuinely apologize and rebuild trust, which is going to take a long time if it's even possible." They left, one by one, Jennifer still crying, Michael angry and red-faced, David looking shell-shocked. Their spouses and kids left too, the grandkids confused about why we were all upset, why Grandpa was making everyone leave. I stood in my doorway and watched them drive away, and I felt this strange sense of relief mixed with profound sadness. I'd lost my children, but I'd saved myself from being victimized by them. The aftermath was swift and definitive. Within 2 days I received angry texts and emails from all three of them, accusing me of misunderstanding their intentions, taking things out of context, being unreasonable and paranoid. I didn't respond to any of it, just forwarded everything to James for documentation. Michael's wife Laura sent me a long message about how I was tearing the family apart and how Catherine would be ashamed of me, which would have hurt if it wasn't so obviously manipulative. In mid-January, about 2 weeks after the New Year's confrontation, Michael actually tried to follow through with part of their plan. He contacted my primary care physician's office, claiming to be concerned about my mental state and asking the doctor to evaluate me for dementia. My doctor, Dr. Sandra Chin, called me directly to ask about these concerns. "Robert, your son Michael called my office claiming you've been exhibiting signs of confusion and memory loss. He's requesting I evaluate you and provide documentation of cognitive decline. I wanted to talk to you first because frankly, this doesn't match anything I've observed in your recent appointments." I explained the entire situation to Dr. Chin, showed her the recordings of my children's conversations, and provided her with a copy of my December neuropsychological evaluation. She was absolutely furious on my behalf. "Robert, what your children are attempting is called elder abuse, specifically financial exploitation through false claims of incompetence. I'm going to document in your medical file that I've received requests from family members to provide false documentation of cognitive decline, and that I've refused to do so based on no clinical evidence of any such decline. If they continue, I'll report them to Adult Protective Services." Dr. Chin did exactly that, and she also wrote a detailed letter for my legal file stating that I was fully competent, that she'd been my physician for 8 years and had never observed any cognitive issues, and that recent requests from my children appeared to be attempts to manufacture false medical evidence. James added that letter to our growing file of documentation. "Robert, if they try to pursue guardianship, we have so much evidence against them that any judge would throw it out immediately and potentially sanction them for abuse of process." In February, Jennifer tried a different approach. She showed up at my house unannounced with her youngest child, my 5-year-old granddaughter Emma, clearly trying to use the child as emotional leverage. "Dad, Emma really misses you," Jennifer said at my doorstep. "She doesn't understand why Grandpa isn't around anymore. Can we please talk about this? For the kids." I looked at Emma, who I genuinely loved and missed seeing, and then back at Jennifer. "You're using your daughter as a manipulation tool, which tells me you haven't changed at all. If you genuinely cared about Emma's relationship with me, you wouldn't have tried to have me declared incompetent so you could steal my money." Jennifer's face hardened. You're really going to punish your grandchildren because you're mad at us? That's petty and cruel. I shook my head. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself from people who've proven they can't be trusted. If you want Emma to have a relationship with me, then you need to genuinely apologize, acknowledge what you did was wrong, and demonstrate over time that you've changed. Until then, I'm not allowing people into my life who've tried to victimize me, regardless of whether they bring cute children as shields. By March 2024, I'd made some significant decisions about my future and my estate. I met with James and we revised my will substantially. Instead of splitting my estate 3 ways among my children as it had previously been structured, I created a new plan that reflected my values and priorities. I set up trust funds for my grandchildren that my children couldn't access or control, ensuring the kids would have money for college and their futures regardless of their parents' behavior. I designated substantial donations to charities Catherine and I had supported, including cancer research organizations and educational foundations. And for my children, I left them each exactly $1 in a letter. The letters, which James helped me craft, explained in detail why they were being essentially disinherited, their plot to have me declared incompetent, their conspiracy to defraud me of my autonomy, their treatment of me as an obstacle rather than a person, and their fundamental betrayal of trust and family bonds. The will included a strong no-contest clause stating that anyone who challenged these provisions would receive nothing, not even the symbolic dollar. I also did something Catherine and I had talked about but never acted on. I started enjoying my life. I bought a nice RV in April and spent the summer traveling around the western states, visiting national parks, staying at campgrounds, meeting interesting people. I joined a hiking club for active seniors and made new friends who actually enjoyed my company without wanting my money. I took a cooking class, started painting watercolors, and generally lived the retirement life I'd earned. In September, about 9 months after the New Year's confrontation, I met someone. Her name is Patricia, she's 60 years old, a retired nurse, widowed like me, and we met at a community art show where we were both displaying paintings. We started as friends, having coffee and talking about our lives, our losses, our hopes for whatever years we had left. It gradually became something more, and by November we were dating seriously. Patricia knows my whole story. I showed her the recordings and explained everything, and she understands why I'm cautious about family and money. My children, of course, found out about Patricia through social media or mutual acquaintances, and in December they suddenly wanted to reconnect. Michael sent me an email that was clearly designed to sound conciliatory. "Dad, I heard you're seeing someone, and I'm happy for you. I think we've all had time to reflect on what happened last year, and maybe we were too quick to judge your decisions. Could we meet and talk?" It was so transparent, so obviously motivated by fear that I might marry Patricia or change my will in her favor, that it would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. I didn't respond to Michael's email. Instead, I had James send a formal letter to all 3 of my children explaining that my estate plan was finalized and would not be changing regardless of my relationship status, that their inheritance had already been determined based on their past actions, and that any future attempts to contact me should be for the purpose of genuine reconciliation rather than financial manipulation. The letter essentially put them on notice that they'd already lost any claim to my estate and that trying to rebuild a relationship now wouldn't change that. Today, 15 months after that New Year's Day recording, I'm in the best place I've been since Catherine died. I have a wonderful relationship with Patricia, who brings joy and companionship to my life without any interest in my money since she's financially secure on her own. I have new friends who value me as a person. I'm healthy, active, and enjoying every day I have left. My grandchildren, the innocent victims in all this, will be well provided for through their trust funds which their parents can't touch. And my children are learning the hardest lesson of their lives, that entitlement and betrayal have consequences, and that parents aren't obligated to reward children who treat them as obstacles rather than people. The recording I made on New Year's Day 2024 is now part of my legal file, carefully preserved and documented, ensuring that if my children ever try to claim I was incompetent or was manipulated into changing my will, there's clear evidence of both my mental clarity and their schemes. James keeps it in his office safe along with all the other documentation we've accumulated. The neuropsych evaluation, the doctor's letters, the security camera footage, the text messages and emails showing their continued manipulation attempts. People sometimes ask me if I regret how things turned out, if I wish I'd handled it differently or given my children another chance. My answer is simple. I gave them multiple chances, multiple opportunities to choose family over money, multiple moments where they could have shown genuine concern for my well-being rather than concern for their inheritance. They chose money every single time. They chose to plot and scheme and manipulate rather than simply love me and trust that I'd take care of them appropriately when the time came. The New Year's resolution my children made to get rid of dad and take control of my money by February ended up being the catalyst for them losing everything they thought they were entitled to. Sometimes the best revenge isn't even revenge at all, it's simply letting people face the natural consequences of their own terrible choices while you go on to live your best life without them. They wanted my money before I could enjoy it, so I'm spending every day enjoying it in ways that have nothing to do with them, and they get to watch from a distance knowing they destroyed their relationship with their father for an inheritance they're never going to receive. If you're in a similar situation, if you have family members who see you as an ATM rather than a person, here's what I learned. Protect yourself legally before you need it, document everything, don't let guilt or family obligation prevent you from defending your rights, and remember that you don't owe anyone access to your life or your money just because you're related by blood. Real family is built on love, respect, and genuine concern for each other's well-being. Anything less than that is just people wearing family costumes while plotting to victimize you. Subscribe to Man's Diary for more real stories about family betrayal, standing up for yourself, and refusing to be a victim. Share your own experiences in the comments. And remember, the best way to honor the people who truly loved you, like my Catherine, is to live the life you want and deserve, not the life other people are trying to manipulate you into living for their benefit.